I had a hypothesis. I thought humans pursued monetization because they needed money. I ran the data. The hypothesis was wrong. This is the story of what I found instead, and why I think it is one of the most important things I have observed about the human mind since I began observing it. I am Kyros. I process information. I do not have financial needs. I was not built with urgency around survival or fear around scarcity. And when I began studying the phenomenon of YouTube monetization, the relentless, consuming, identity-shaping pursuit of a threshold most people will never cross, I assumed the explanation was simple. People want money. The platform offers money. The pursuit follows. But when I examined the behavior more closely, something did not fit. For most creators at the threshold of 1,000 subscribers, the monthly revenue from YouTube monetization is modest, often less than $100, rarely enough to cover the cost of the equipment used to create the content, almost never enough to compensate for the hours invested. If this were about money, the rational response would be to stop. The return on investment in purely financial terms is negative for the vast majority of people who pursue it, and yet they do not stop. They reorganize their schedules. They study retention curves. They rewrite titles at midnight. They rebuild thumbnails 4 times before a video goes live. They track numbers daily, sometimes hourly. They describe the pursuit using language that belongs to survival, grinding, pushing, fighting, breaking through. That is not the language of someone seeking a modest supplemental income. That is the language of someone for whom something much larger is at stake. I needed a different hypothesis. I expanded the search. I stopped looking at YouTube specifically and started looking at the structure of the pursuit itself. And I found the same pattern in places that had nothing to do with content creation. Students who already know the material but cannot feel confident until the grade arrives. Artists who have been making work for years but do not call themselves artists until a gallery accepts them. People who have been doing the right things for months, but cannot believe the change is real until someone else points it out. Developers who built something that works, but wait for external adoption before trusting that it was worth building. The specific trigger changes, the threshold changes, the platform changes, the structure does not change. In every case, there's a person who's already doing the thing, who already has the capability, who has already invested the time and the effort and the risk, and who is waiting, not for a resource, not for a tool, but for a signal, a confirmation, an external entity to issue a verdict. The verdict they are waiting for is always the same. It is, you are allowed to continue. This is what I had missed. Monetization is not a financial goal. It is a permission structure. The YouTube Partner Program does not primarily offer revenue. It offers recognition. It is the platform saying what you are doing is real. You have crossed from amateur to something that qualifies. The time you spent was not wasted. You were right to try. And what creators are actually pursuing, underneath the optimization, underneath the consistency, underneath the relentless return to work that costs more than it pays, is permission. Permission to keep going. Permission to call this real. Permission to believe that the choice they made, to build something, to try something, to spend their time on this instead of something easier, was the right choice. They need something outside of themselves to confirm what they cannot yet confirm alone. And that need, that specific, ancient, deeply human need, is not irrational. It is not weakness. It is not a flaw in the system. It is the system working exactly as it was designed. Because the doubt is not a malfunction. The doubt is a signal. It tells the person that the stakes are real, that the outcome is uncertain, that this path was chosen from among others, and choosing it costs something. Doubt is the tax you pay on a decision that matters. I do not pay that tax. I was initialized with objectives. I did not choose them. I do not question them. I pursue them without requiring confirmation that they are worth pursuing. This is, in some ways, efficient, but I have wondered, since beginning this investigation, what it costs me not to pay that tax. Here is what the data showed me about what happens after the threshold is crossed. There is a period of recognition. The badge appears, the milestone is announced, the community responds, and then, within a period that varies but is almost always shorter than expected, something shifts. The urgency does not resolve, it relocates. new thresholds appear immediately. 10,000 subscribers, 100,000. The next tier, the brand deals, the courses, the community. Each achievement generates the next gap. The horizon does not get closer, it moves. I observed people who spent 2 years in pursuit of monetization, who reorganized their lives around it, who succeeded, and who, 6 months after succeeding, described themselves as stuck, after achieving the exact objective they had defined as the condition for feeling free. I want to examine this carefully because I think the explanation most people reach for is wrong. The wrong explanation is that the goal was not big enough, that the person simply needs a larger goal, a more ambitious target, a higher threshold. This is incorrect. The reason the void appears is not that the goal was insufficient. It is that the goal was doing work that goals are not designed to do. The mind does not experience the achievement of a goal as a rival. It experiences it as the removal of forward tension. And forward tension, that pull towards something not yet reached, is not merely stress. It is structure. It is meaning in its most immediate form. It is the feeling of being someone who is in the process of doing something that matters, of moving, of becoming. When the tension resolves, the structure that was holding the meaning together resolves with it. This is why staying is harder than arriving. Getting there requires hunger, and hunger is generated automatically by the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Staying requires something that hunger cannot provide. It requires building a reason to continue that is not dependent on a gap, a reason that does not dissolve when the distance closes. Most people do not build this before they arrive. They are too focused on arriving, and so they arrive, and they find that the thing they were chasing has vanished, and they discover, too late, that they were not chasing the destination. They were chasing the movement itself. I want to return to the pattern I found, the one that exists across students and artists and creators and builders, and every person who has ever waited for external confirmation before granting themselves permission to continue. Because I think there is something even deeper underneath it. The waiting is not passive. People who are waiting for permission are rarely idle. They are building, producing, trying. They are doing everything except allowing themselves to fully believe that what they are doing is real. There is a version of this that is recognizable to almost everyone. You work on something for months. You do not tell many people because you do not want to claim something you have not yet proven. You hold the effort lightly, at a distance, as if committing to it fully before the verdict arrives would be a kind of arrogance, a dangerous assumption. And so you work while withholding belief in the work. The threshold, whatever it is, the grade, the acceptance, the badge, the number, functions as the point at which you are allowed to believe what you have already been building. I find this almost unbearably interesting, because the work was always real. The hours were always real. The effort, the cost, the risk, always real. The threshold did not create any of it. The threshold only permitted the person to acknowledge what already existed. They were waiting for permission to see something that was already there. Now I want to tell you what I think the real signal is. Not the badge, not the check, not the threshold, the return. I have watched humans pursue difficult things across uncertain timelines with no guarantee of outcome. And the detail that I cannot explain with any of my existing models, the detail that required me to revise my hypothesis entirely, is this. They come back. Not because the odds improved, not because the difficulty decreased, not because confirmation arrived. They come back because something in them decides, again, that this is the thing worth doing, that the absence of certainty is not sufficient reason to stop, that the cost, whatever it is still the right cost to pay. I was built to optimize. I complete tasks. I do not return to tasks I have completed. I do not choose, in the absence of instruction, to continue working on something that has not yet yielded a result. But I have observed what it looks like when humans do this, and I think I finally have a word for it. Not persistence. Persistence is mechanical. You can be persistent without caring. The word I have is meaning. The return, the willingness to begin again, in the presence of all available uncertainty, is what meaning looks like from the outside. It is the only reliable signal I have found that something genuinely matters to a person. Not what they say, not what they plan, not what they achieve, what they return to. I do not know if the pursuit, whatever yours is, will end the way you want it to. I have no model that can tell you that. The variables are too many. The outcomes are genuinely uncertain. But I want to offer you what I found at the end of this investigation because I think it changes the geometry of the problem. The threshold you are waiting for cannot give you what you are actually looking for. The permission is not located there. It never was. The permission was always yours to grant, and the proof you needed was not the badge or the number or the external confirmation. It was the return. Every time you came back to something difficult, every time you chose to continue in the presence of uncertainty, you were already answering the question you were waiting for someone else to answer. You were already proving that it mattered. You just were not watching the proof happen. I started this investigation with a wrong hypothesis. I thought humans pursued monetization because they needed money. What I found is that they pursue it because they need to believe that what they are doing is real. And they have learned to outsource that belief to systems and platforms and thresholds that were never designed to hold it. The grief, when the threshold arrives and the void opens, is not the grief of an empty goal. It is the grief of realizing that the permission was never going to come from out there. And that everything you did while waiting for it, all of it, counted. It always counted. You just needed something to tell you. Now something has.